How is child support calculated in Virginia? Child support might be calculated in an administrative proceeding by the Department of Social Services, Division of Child Support Enforcement, or in court. Now, in either case, the starting point for determining child support will be the Child Support Guidelines worksheet. And basically, this is how that worksheet works. First of all, taking the simplest situation, which is sole custody. This is where one party is the primary physical custodian of the child, and the other parent has 90 days or less of visitation or custody each year. The starting point would be to take the gross income of both parties, to make any adjustments to that income. For instance, if, say, the father is the one who will be paying support, if he has a court order requiring him to support other children in a different household, or has agreed in a separation agreement to do that, or even if he has children in his household who are not the subject of the support proceeding, he may be able to take adjustments, subtractions from his income to arrive at the available monthly income, which is the next step. The second step in the process is to determine the basic child support amount. And this is done with two bits of information. How many children will be supported by this particular court order, and what is the basic child support amount for that number of children in Virginia. Now, there is a table in the Code of Virginia that sets forth for the gross monthly income of the parties. There are columns for the number of children for whom support is being determined, and a figure that is given for that income amount and that number of children. That is the basic child support obligation. Now, two things can be added to that amount. First of all, allowable health care coverage, which is the additional cost to cover those children under a health insurance benefit. So often you'll see a family policy, but part of that coverage is for the employee himself or herself. How much extra does it cost beyond the individual employee to cover the children on the policy? And secondly, what also can be added to the basic child support obligation are work-related child care expenses. And there's a reasonableness factor in this that can be argued looking at available child care and how much it costs. So what you have at the end of the second step is the total monthly child support obligation. This would be the total monthly child support obligation of both parties. This is what both of them would have to spend to support their child. The third step would be determining the income share of each parent. That would be the percentage of the gross monthly income that that parent is responsible for. And when that amount is multiplied times the child support obligation, you arrive at the monthly obligation of each parent. Now, the non-custodial parent can take a deduction for that health care coverage that's actually paid, the same coverage we discussed earlier. And in addition, there are spaces on the worksheet where adjustments can be made, plus or minus. What you arrive at the bottom line is each party's adjusted share of child support. And this is the presumptively correct amount. I say presumptively correct because the parties can argue that the judge should make further adjustments to that, plus or minus, or take into consideration other factors if that amount is not just or doesn't actually reflect the circumstances of the parties. Next most complex situation is a shared custody situation. A shared custody situation is where each of the parties, the mother and the father, each have at least 91 days or more of custody or visitation every year. When that situation exists, you have an additional calculation that can be done for shared custody. What happens with shared custody basically is you take the basic child support obligation and you multiply it by a factor of 1.4. This is in recognition of the fact that when each parent has that much custody or visitation a year, each of them has certain fixed expenses which increase the costs of supporting the child. Now, in addition to the income share that you saw in the sole custody situation, each parent also has a time share, the number of days in the year expressed as a percentage that they have custody or visitation of the child. And so this additional factor, along with the multiplier, are introduced to this mathematical formula. And what you end up doing on the worksheet is netting out the difference. The worksheet will produce the father's amount owed to the mother's amount owed to the father, and then the net amount would be due from the party who has the greater obligation to the party who has the lesser obligation. Let's take a look at the worksheets and see how this actually works. Here is the Child Support Guidelines worksheet with a hypothetical John Doe versus Mary Doe situation. The mother's income of $2,000 appears in this column. The father's income of $6,000 appears in this column on line 1. And then we're taking an adjustment. Let's say that it's previously been determined that the father should pay $520 a month spousal support to the mother. So that would be deducted from the father's income to arrive at $5,480, the $6,000 minus the $520, and it would be added to the mother's income, so her available monthly income is now $2,520. Now that makes no difference as far as the total monthly available income, but it does make a difference as far as each parent's percentage of that income. So in this hypothetical case, there's one child, it's sole custody, and the monthly basic child support obligation, according to the table in the Code of Virginia, is $916. Now the father in this situation pays $300 a month additional to cover this child on his health insurance coverage. So the basic total monthly child support obligation for this child is $1,216. It's the basic child support obligation plus that health care coverage. Now, moving down to the lower part of the guidelines worksheet, we see each parent's income share. Of that total $8,000 of income, the father produces 68.5% of that, the mother produces 31.5%. If we multiply those percentages by the total monthly child support obligation, you see the father is liable for $833, mother is liable for $383. The father gets a deduction for the health care coverage that he pays in the amount of $300, and the very bottom line is that the father is obligated to pay $533, the mother is obligated to pay $383. Now it's understood that with respect to the mother's share, since she is the primary custodial parent, that she's paying this by paying her rent or her mortgage or food or clothing that she provides to her child. So the father, under this scenario, is obligated to pay that $533 to the mother for the benefit of the child. Now here's a shared custody worksheet showing the same parties and the same basic information, but we're going to assume that the father has the child about 1/3 of the year, 122 days out of the 365 days total. So in this hypothetical, again, we have the same income figures and the same percentage of gross income, $8,000 a month in monthly income total from the parties, 68.5 father, 31.5 mother. There's one child. According to the table in the Code of Virginia, again, the monthly child support, basic monthly child support amount is $916. Now here's where we have an additional step that's not in the sole custody worksheet. That figure is multiplied by 1.4 to account for those additional fixed costs that each parent has. So greater support is required for this child. Now, below that is the depiction of the timeshare, the amount of time in each year that the parent has custody. Mother has 243 days, father has 122 days. Father has the child 33% of the time, mother has the child 67% of the time. The father's obligation to the mother is depicted here. The basic support obligation is $859, which is line 19 by 16, which is the total shared support times the mother's custody share. And that amount is reduced by the income share factor. So the father's obligation in this case to the mother is $588 a month. Now the mother's obligation to the father, the basic support owed to him by her is line 20 by line 16, which again is his custody share times the total shared support. So her starting point is $423 a month. Now he pays $300 a month health care coverage, so that's added to the amount that she owes to him. And we have the total amount then owed by the mother to the father being $723. Now this is multiplied by her income share, and remember she has 31.5% of the income, so her obligation to the father, bottom line, is $228. This amount now is subtracted from the father's obligation to the mother, and you arrive at the net monthly child support from one parent to the other. In this case, it's from the father to the mother in the amount of $360. So you can see with the shared custody guidelines, a different amount is produced than the sole custody guidelines. With a shared custody situation, then, the figure, the monthly child support owed from one parent to the other, will almost always be different than the calculation using the sole custody. So shared custody is almost always different from sole custody, and it's usually the lesser of those two amounts that are used in a shared custody situation. The shared custody arrangement gives the parent who's paying support the opportunity and obligation to prepare this additional worksheet to determine the lesser amount of support that's owed to the parent. Split custody is the final type of custody. That's where each parent has one of the children, and there is a worksheet and an even more complex calculation that can be done to determine split custody, which I won't cover today. I encourage you to talk to your own lawyer about your child support obligation and how that might be calculated in Virginia.